Once again, you're welcome to this course, Networking and Session Management, and we're in chapter 7, part 4, and this part talks about the router's privilege execute mode. Okay, here we want to look at, when you configure the router has to understand, like we said, you use what we call the Cisco Ethernet network operating system, right? And you use the command line interface to input any of the command into the router, okay, to the software. Okay, now the first one that enables us to do work is called the privileged execute mode, the router's privileged execute mode, which is called router hashtag. Okay, so the execute mode, the privileged mode, it's called the hashtag. The privileged mode is called what? The hashtag. The privileged mode is called the hashtag. So anytime you see this hashtag in front of a router, it means the router is in the privileged mode. Okay? It means the router is in the privileged mode. So whenever we have the privileged mode, the privileged mode is the mode that enables us to do configuration, okay, on the router, to do the configuration. So once we first and foremost, to put a router in a privileged mode is to put the router, to add the hashtag function in front of the router in the command line interface. So hence we'll be able to configure. So that's the brief introduction of the topic. Today's topic is the router's privileged execute mode. Okay, so now the introductory part of this section is that we're going to learn how to configure a router's interface. And to do that, we require the privilege mode. We need to first and foremost put the router in a privilege mode. So in order to configure anything on the router's interface, we must understand how to put the router in the privilege mode. Like I said, if you open the command line interface from the operating system, the Cisco Ethernet network operating system, once you open the command line interface, then the first thing you do is to put the router in a privilege mode before we can execute any command. On the configuration, for the configuration. And to do that, we say you should push hashtag in front of your router. Type router in the command line interface, and then you put hashtag in front of it. Once that is done, then we've successfully put the router in a privilege mode. Okay, so that's the first thing we're looking at today's course. Now the next is that the privilege modes allow it will enable us, it will allow us, give us access, full access, for us to be able to configure the router's interfaces, all the various interfaces, whether it's a serial interface, password, whatever interface you want to configure. So it gives you full access. Once you put the router in a privilege mode, then it gives you full access to all the interfaces, and after that you are able to configure any routing protocol that you want to configure. You'll be able to configure. So first of all, you have to install the Cisco's Ethernet network operating system. The second foremost, you have to open the command line interface. The third and foremost is to put the router in the privilege mode. Now, to put a router in a privilege mode is to just put hashtag in front of a router. Type a router and put hashtag in front of it. Then the router will be in the privilege mode. And once that is done, you'll be able to have full access into all the configuration of the router's interfaces. All the interfaces that you want to do, you'll be able to do this. Now the configuring routing, and also it will also give you access to all the configuring routing protocols that will be done on the router or that has been done on the router. Okay, so another part of this chapter we want to cover is in this chapter is to focus on the general configuration steps. Okay, the steps that you need, the general step that you need in order for us to configure the router, and then also configuring the router's interface. So not only to step for configuring router, also we're going to learn the steps for configuring router interfaces. So whether it's both the Ethernet and the serial. So we're going to learn all the interfaces. We have the one of the interface for router is the Ethernet, and the other interface for router is the serial cable. Configuring the serial cable to the router, and also configuring the Ethernet itself, the one you call the internet. Configuring the router to be able to access the Ethernet. Okay, so the LAN, configuring the router to be able to access your local area network. Okay, so that in itself is what part of the things we're going to learn in this chapter. So we should be able to configure the router to access the Ethernet, and to configure the router to also see or read the cursors in the serial cables. Okay, so now, like we said, the privilege mode, we've talked about it in the introductory part. Say the privilege mode, to put a router in the privilege mode, once you type your command interface, the privilege mode is entered using the command enable. So to put once you put the operating system, the internetwork operating system, the Cisco internetwork operating system. So to start is to type the word enable. Okay, just click enable or type enable at the router. So once you router, then you put enable. So router like this, just like this, the way you see it like this. Type router. Once you type router, this sign, like greater than sign, will follow, and then you type enable. Okay, once you type enable, then you are one step ahead. The next thing to type is to type router, and then you put hashtag in front of the router in another line. Okay, not same line. Once you reach here, you click enter, you go to a new line. So you type router, and you put hashtag in front of the router. Once this is done, then you have successfully put the router in the privilege mode. You've successfully put the router in the privilege mode. And once you put a router in the privilege mode, like we said before, you'll be able to access, or you'll be able to configure anything on the router, and you'll be able to access all the configuration. Okay, not only to configure, also be able to access the configuration, whether be it the Ethernet or be it the serial. Okay, you'll be able to access all of this. Okay, so that's the first step. Okay, the next thing is that you be careful, use caution once you have entered the privilege mode in a router. You have to be careful now because you are in the interface. So you can configure anything at this point now. You can configure anything. So you have to really be careful. So you use caution, and once you enter the privilege mode, it is easy to make mistakes and incorrectly enter wrong configuration. And once you incorrectly enter wrong configuration, this will affect the entire network. So very easy to make mistake, and the moment you enter wrong configurations, then this will go a long way affecting the entire network. So we have to be careful. It sounds very easy, but we really have to be careful. Now let's take a look at the configuration mode itself. How do we configure the router to access our local area network? The first and foremost thing we do, or the next thing we do, because we've talked about the first thing we do. The first thing we do, we say put the router in the privilege mode. So that is done successfully. The next is to start the configuration itself. So we can say the next thing to do when you put the router in the privilege mode, the next thing to do is to put commands. You type in some commands, examine and require the router's terminal configuration mode to be entered. So you put a command by saying, for example, you say config, and then you type what you're going to do next. Config what? So most likely we put the terminal. Say config terminal. Okay? So you put the next thing to enter, you put it. Say config the terminal. To do this, you enter the command configure terminal. And the abbreviation for it, you don't type everything, is config T. Conf space T. Okay? And after you put the router in the privilege mode. Now, there are many routers in a network, so you must define the routers. Maybe router A, router B, router C, router D. So you have to define. So the router, let's say we deal with the first router, and we named it router A. So router A hashtag means it's already in the privilege mode. Then, before we type any of this one, config T. Okay? So prompt to enter the router's configuration mode. Like for example, like this. So you type router A hashtag, meaning this router A is already in the privilege mode. Then you follow it with config space terminal, meaning you are telling this router A that is already in the privilege mode to configure the terminal, the terminals into the router. That's the first. You see, this is the next step, the next command we enter into the configuration software. This is the next command we put in. Router A hashtag, meaning it's already in the privilege mode, and then we say config the terminal. Then we click enter configuration command, one per line. Any of the command, whatever you want to do, but everything you are doing, one per line. Don't put all instructions or command instructions or the language all in one line. So every config word, config terminal, config IP address, config this, all of them separate line. Whatever you configure it, you config router A hashtag config IP address, router A hashtag config password. You put the password. So each of them must be in a separate line. Each of them must be in a separate line. Okay? So one per line. And then at the end of the, when you finish, you put Ctrl Z, you put Ctrl/Z. Okay, router A config. Okay, so you may enter like this. Look at it. Router A hashtag, meaning this router A. This means this router A is in the privilege mode. Now you say configure the terminal. Configure terminal. So you may write full or you abbreviate like this. Okay, it's allowed. You may write full or abbreviate. This is, see the instructions here, they were abbreviated. Here we're writing them full. The same thing. Okay. So here we abbreviate. This language is allowed. The operating system takes this. The Cisco Internet operating system takes this command. Okay. Enter configuration command. Any configuration command that I have explained. See here, enter configuration command. Anyone, one per line. End with Ctrl Z. Router A in bracket config. You end with this. Router A. In the end, you put this hashtag in the end. For router A config. Then you click enter. You run. So it will be taken. Now, next one, I think we're going to configure the password. We configure the password. So password protection. You want to protect your password. You go to configure the password for the router. So password protection for privilege enable mode is configured by setting the enable secret. So if you want to configure a password, you type enable. Okay, enable secret. Then you put the password that you want. Enable secret. Once you type enable secret, then you are about to configure a password on the router, on the command interface. Okay, enable secret. That's, you are telling the system to see a secret. Enable secret. Now the steps are, we're going to see them, itemize them, and follow them. Now we say enter the router's configure terminal mode by entering the config terminal or config T. So it's conf T. Instead of say configure terminal is long, right, to type on your command line interface. So you can just say conf T. Just say conf T. And the router hashtag. After the router hashtag. Remember, if you don't write router hashtag, the router will not be in a privilege mode. And if it's not in the privilege mode, you cannot use the router. You cannot key in your command. Okay, so you have to put it in the hashtag router hashtag prompt. Put it in that interface before you enter. So you say enter the command enable secret. Once you put the command enable secret, once you type this command, you say router config hashtag enable secret. Then you put whatever password you want. You put your password. And you put your password. You see, after you say enable secret, then you follow it up with the password you want. Your password, any password you want, you put it, you configure it along with it. Then you click enter. You click enter, and then it will configure your password for the interface. For example, you can say router hashtag config T, that's you want to configure a terminal. Then hashtag puts in a privilege mode, config T, router in bracket config hashtag. We go to another line, router config hashtag. Then you put what you want to do, enable secret. When you say enable secret, meaning you want the interface to put a password. After router config hashtag, this config will be in bracket. Okay, only this first one is hello without bracket. This second one, you say router bracket config hashtag. You go to another line, router in bracket config hashtag. Then you put you say enable secret. Then you write your password. This password this person chose is my secret. My secret is his password. My secret dash my dash secret. That's his password. So if you don't know this password, you can never access this. Is that okay? So we've learned how to configure a terminal. We've learned how to, first of all, we learned how to put a router in a privilege mode. And then next, we learned how to configure a terminal. Now, third case, we've learned how to configure a password. Okay? This sets the password for entry the router's privilege mode to my secret. The password will be set to my secret. So anybody who does not know this my dash secret will not be able to open this system. Okay? The password for entering the router's privilege mode must now be entered to gain access to the router's privilege mode. So once you do this configuration for the first time, anybody that wants to use that router, wants to config, must know the password, must know this my dash secret in order to access the privilege mode. Is that okay? Now the fourth thing, after we talked about first, we said put the router in the privilege mode. Second, configure the terminal. Third, you configure the password. Okay, password is enable secret. Router config, put config in bracket, hashtag enable secret. There you put any password you want. The fourth thing to do is setting the line cursor password. Okay, apart from the router password, now we're talking about the line cursor password. To configure that, the router has 3 line connections that can be used by a user to gain access to the router. There are 3 line connections a router has that anybody can use to gain access to a router. The line connections available on a router can be displayed using the line. Using the line command at the router. So we're going to use a line command to configure and have access to a router. Router config hashtag. They will put any prompt that we want to put. Now the available line connections typically are 1. The auxiliary line. We have the auxiliary line of the router, which is called the modem backup. We have the cursor, the primary terminal line. It's called the cursor port. You have to put a password into the cursor port so everyone don't have access to it. Then you have the virtual terminal for Ethernet communication, like normal telecommunications. So you also have the virtual terminal. You have to put a password. So these are the 3 different lines that you have to configure with password on a router. The auxiliary line, the one for the modem in your house or in your office. Okay, you have to configure it with a password, and then you have to configure the cursor, the console, which is called the console port. You have to configure it with a password, and then the virtual terminal. The virtual terminal, you have to configure it with a password. So these 3 line commands have to be entered, have to be configured in order for us to gain access to the router's full operation. Okay. Now the console, that's the primary terminal. The console line or the primary terminal is the cursor port. Is the one we call the cursor port, and the virtual VTY is the virtual terminal used for Ethernet connections. Right. Now the following steps demonstrate how to configure the password protection for the cursor port and the virtual terminal. So now we're not focusing on the modem backup. So we're looking at the cursor port password and the virtual terminal password. Now let's take a look at these passwords. The first one is a router config hashtag. So you put the router in the proper privilege mode. Line cursor 0. So you are telling that you are, because we are configuring a line now, we are configuring a line. Okay, so line cursor 0. Then this first one is for configuring this first one is for configuring the take the Ethernet line. Wait, let's see. Say router config line cursor 0 for configuring the console port. This is for configuring the console port. You can see the cursor 0. Okay, it could be cursor 1 depending on which of the ports are you configuring. So router config hashtag line cursor 0. Then router config line hashtag login. So when you say login means you must now configure the password. So you see we put login. So meaning we want to create a password for cursor 0. We want to create a password for cursor 0. So that's why we follow the next line after router config hashtag line cursor 0. We enter, we go to the next line, we say router config line. Now we are specific that we're configuring a cursor line. Router config line hashtag login. So you've told it that you should configure a login, meaning there must be username and password. Then the third one, you say router config line hashtag. Okay, you can see 2 and 3 are same. Then password. You know, after login is usually username, right? After login, then you put the password, my secret 2. So is my dash secret 2. You can continue to increase the password just by changing 2, 3, 4 like that. The same, so that you don't forget. Same starting. If you are doing for cursor, you can say my secret 2. If you are doing, remember when we did for the terminal, we use my secret. Okay, now we are doing for the cursor port, we put the password to be my-secret 2. Okay, so once you do this 3-line command interface, you type this in the router privilege mode, then you've configured the cursor 0. Then here is to configure. What you see here is for us to configure the virtual terminal. You say router config hashtag line virtual terminal 04. Router config line hashtag login, because we want to put the login and the password. Router config line hashtag password my secret 3. So you know all the password cannot be exactly same, so you must differentiate them. My-secret 3. So once you've done these two, you've configured both the cursor port and you configure the virtual terminal. Okay, now let's move on to any other configuration. Now we want to configure the FastEthernet interface. Remember, this is the 5th one. We want to configure the FastEthernet interface, and also we're going to configure the serial cable. We're going to configure the router serial cable. The cables that comes to the router, we're going to learn how to configure them. So here we say for the FastEthernet Ethernet interface configuration. So what we just need to type, you say router config hashtag interface, okay, interface FA 0/0. You know we have 0/1, 0/2, 0/. We're starting from 0/1. The interface is FA, okay, FA 0/0. This is a interface FastEthernet slot port. The slot and the port. This slot 0, port 0. Could be 0/1 means slot 0, port 1. 0/2 is slot 0, port 2. So just that. You have to enter the slot and the port. Okay? This FA is FastEthernet, fast. Okay? You say route. The interface is FastEthernet 0 slot port. Okay, so you say router config hashtag interface, int is interface, then fast 0/0. Then the next thing you have to put the IP address, because when you're configuring, we're talking about the Ethernet. Ethernet is like the internet. You have to put the IP address so that you can access. So router config if we're doing IP address, if hashtag, then you say IP address 10-10.10.20.250. Then when you put your IP address, you have to put the subnet mask 225.225.225.0. So you follow the IP address with the subnet mask. So once you type, see, router config if dash if hashtag, you put in bracket, then you say hashtag, then you write IP address, then you type the IP address 10.10.20.250. That's the IP address. But this IP address has a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. Okay, so once you enter this, we go to the next command interface. We say router config if not is short. Okay, if no any other thing, then short. So meaning with this command interface, you've entered the protocols. You've entered the protocol. If you've told it to shut down, if not, it's in use. Okay. Now the next one is checking the interface configuration status. What you've done, you have to check. Okay. Say, if you want to check, you just type router hashtag sh IP address interface brief. Once you type this, it will give you all the brief things regarding the configuration you just made. This one means you are checking. Okay, router hashtag sh IP address interface brief. Then if you run everything down for you, it will tell you all the interface that you have configured. Look at the interface. The first interface we configured is the FastEthernet 0/0. FastEthernet, the slot is 0 and the port is 0. Now, what is the IP address of that Ethernet? See the IP address? We say is 10.10.20.250. And is it okay? Yes, it's okay. Meaning it's working. Method manual. Status is up. Protocol is up. Protocol is up, meaning it can communicate. Status is up, meaning the network is up, is working. Okay. Now another one you probably have configured is look at the interface, FastEthernet 0/1. Now I told you this. You have 0/0, 0/1, 0/2. What it means is that you are using slot 0, but you have port 0, port 1, port 2, port 3, port 4, like that, continuing that. If you are using slot 1, this will become FastEthernet 1/0, 1/1, 1/2, 1/. Okay, so in that manner. So in the second case, we have FastEthernet 0/1. That's the interface. Then the IP address 10.10.200.1. Is it working? Yes. Which method manual? The status is up. Protocol is up. So then another interface is FastEthernet 0/2. The IP address is 10.10.100.1. So is it up? Yes. Manual? Yes. Up? Yes. Working? Yes. So everything is fine. So this is checking. So anytime you want to check, type this command, type this program on your command interface in the execute mode, in the privilege mode. So type this in the privilege mode, router hashtag sh IP, then interface brief. It will run all your configurations that you've done. It will run them out for you. Is that okay? Then we move to the next one, configuring the serial interface. I think this is probably the last part of it. How do we configure the serial interface of a router? Configuring the serial interface. Now we say configuring the serial port requires the following questions to be answered first. If you want to configure the serial port, you need to answer the following question. One of it is, what is the IP address of the interface? You must know the IP address if you want to configure. Just like when we configure the excuse me, okay? When we configure the FastEthernet just now, you need to know the IP address when you are configuring the Ethernet. Similarly, when you are configuring the serial port, you need also to know the IP address. So you must address these questions. If you don't know the IP address, you may not be able to do the configuration for the FastEthernet, and you may not also be able to do the configuration for the serial interface. So another question that you need to answer before you start this configuration is, what is the subnet mask of the interface? Because every IP address will follow it with the subnet mask. Then the third question to be answered is, what interfaces are responsible for providing clocking? What interface do you need to provide clocking? Like your protocols, okay? So you need to know which interface will provide clocking for this serial port. Then we start. Now to do this, configuring the serial interface, you normal router config hashtag, then you type interface, you put S means what? Serial. You see, this serial. This one means serial slot 0/0 means slot 0, port 0. So interface serial slot port. That's what this S0/0. This INT it means interface. So this is the command you enter into your router's privilege mode if you want to configure the serial interface. Router config hashtag interface S0/0. Then you go to the next line. The next line is router config if, router config if hashtag IP address 10.10.50.30. Then you follow it with the subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Okay, so this is what you do. This is how you configure the serial interface. You must know the command to type in the router execute mode or the privilege mode. So after that, you put this interface, the serial interface, the slot, the port, and then you put the IP address and the subnet mask. Okay, so you can see router config if hashtag sh to check for you, controller serial 0/0. So once you type it, this is going to be responsible for what is going on. Okay, it shows you, since you put the controller, it's telling you HD, HD unit 0, IDB. This is your hexadecimal context. Your driver structure is this one, D4 in hexadecimal notation, D4 DC8. Your buffer size is 1524. Your HD unit is 0. Your V35, you have a DC. So it runs everything. The control serial 00. It runs everything about this serial thing for you. So once you type router config if SH, because SH is for checking details, the details of the router and or of the things of the SH controller serial. This if you run all the serial cable, if you run everything out for you. Okay, so you can see your CDA. It runs all the in hexadecimal form, in hex. It runs all this figure for you in hexadecimal. Okay, because if you want to put them in binary, it will be super long. So you simply put them in hexadecimal. Your EDA gives you the value. Your CDA, OX means hexadecimal in this regard. It gives you the CDA value 4800. It gives you the CP capability per bit. It gives you 21 and so on. All the values it will give you to you. Then another thing you can also do, you say router A hashtag SH is for checking something. Controller serial 0/1 means slot 0 port 1. This one was slot 0, port 0. So these are different things. So it's going to run for this port 1, it's going to also run all the data for you. This is for checking everything. Okay, router is hashtag sh controller serial 0/1. It runs all the HDD, the HD unit, the HDD, the IDB, the driver structure, all the things you need, the buffer size, the HD unit, the CPB, and everything. If you run them out for you. Okay, these are for checking. So still on the configuring the serial interface, like we always say, now we want to the clocking. You know there are 3 phases. You have to know. One is the port, the slot, and the port for serial cable, serial port. Then another thing you have to know is your IP address. Another thing is your clocking. So the last part of the configuration is to configure the clock rate. The clock rate of for this hardware device and the router, the software. Okay, so here you type router config if hashtag clock rate 56,000. So the last part you say router config if hashtag no shutdown. Okay, so you put this. If nothing, then you can shut. Okay, so it runs all this for you. No shut. So it runs it tells you the uplink, the downlink, the interface you are using. So this is the last part. This part is to check everything. Okay. No shut means show me. Don't shut down, but show me. Okay. It shows you the percentage, the uplink, the downlink, the CRO, change state to up, and everything. Okay, it will show you to display here. So checking the configuration, we already say if you want to check, it's just to type router hashtag sh IP interface brief. Once you type this on the privilege mode, everything comes out. It shows you the interfaces, all the interfaces that you have configured. Okay, FastEthernet 0/0, FastEthernet 0/1, FastEthernet 0/2. Then, not only that have we configured, we've also configured serial 0/0, serial 1/0. We've done this. These are their corresponding IP addresses. Are they okay? Yes, they are all okay. They are working. Manual up. The status is all up. No down. No one is down. And the protocols, they are all up, meaning it can communicate. So this is the end of our section, and these are some of the words we've used: the privilege mode, enable, router, hashtag, configure terminal. All of these words we have used in the course of this study. So thank you for joining us for our today's class.